Hello everyone, it's Mary. Welcome back to the Live Well channel. I'm so glad you're stopping by to hang out with Bodi and myself for this conversation. Before we get into that, don't forget, if you don't want to miss when we upload here on the Live Well channel, hit that subscribe button. If you like this conversation, hit the like button, and there's a notification if you want to get the little bell to tell you when things happen here on the channel. So all the YouTubey things, don't forget to do those. All right, so what we're talking about today, so I invited Bodi to have a chat with us because I find him to be one of the most inspirational people I've met out in life and the interweb. So we'll talk about a little bit how we got introduced, but I really want to share his story with you. Now, full disclosure, I knew that he had shared his story of adversity on his podcast, the Shadows podcast, but I chose not to listen to the specifics of it because I really wanted to dive in with him today here on the Live Well channel. And I'm glad I did, but at the same time, should have had my tissues ready. So his story of triumph in personal adversity, the loss of loved ones, and how he's managed to really use that as the catalyst for his well-being and his self-care. It's truly inspiring. So without further ado, let's hear from Bodi. All right, everybody, let's get into the conversation today with Tripp Bodenheimer. Tripp, you go by Bodi? But
I do.
You do? Okay.
It's weird. Like LinkedIn, it's Edward. Facebook, it's Tripp. And then if people know me on a personal level, it's more Bodi. So I've got a lot of aliases.
Awesome. A man of many names.
Exactly.
He's here to talk to us today. I'm really excited about this. Bodi, can I call you? Am I on the friends list?
You're on the friends list. Yeah.
So Bodi is active duty Air Force, currently serving 14 years so far. And he's also the founder of the Shadows podcast. So I'm going to turn it over to Bodi to talk a little bit more about himself, and then we're going to get into it. Over to you.
Yeah. So just as you mentioned, 14 years, active duty Air Force, spent first 6 years or so, 7 years in the communication squadron as a comm guy for non-military folks. Is basically just working on computers, and very important job. Loved it. Then I got asked to be an airman leadership school instructor, so I got to teach future frontline supervisors how to lead, how to supervise, and I did that for 3 years when I was in Germany. And then I got asked if I would like to come teach the instructors, the active duty instructors, down in Montgomery, Alabama, which is where I am now. And pretty much all the instructors that get selected, they have to learn how to manage a classroom, how to facilitate discussions, questioning techniques, active listening, all that good stuff. And I've been fortunate enough to have that job working with them for the past 4 years, and it is absolutely incredible. And yeah, then I have the Shadows podcast also.
Awesome. Well, you're not busy at all.
No. We just graduated my last class yesterday. So to me, it's like, all right, now the out processing and stuff starts. So I'm intrigued.
Okay. Yeah. So it's interesting you said that you moved down to Alabama to teach the teachers, if you will, right? So I have more questions on that in just a little bit, but I love that you added, you explained and clarified your acronyms because we do have a lot of non-military people that listen to
have to do the same on mine. Yeah.
That's pretty good. I'm still working on that, and like the lingo too, and some of the jargon. So good. You've set the stage. So talk to us a bit about the Shadows podcast. Like, why you're active duty, you have a full-time job that's very demanding already. What made you want to start a podcast, and what is it about?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I was I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Llama Lounge.
Mm-hmm. I am.
Yep. So they formerly around the Llama Lounge, but great senior non-commissioned officers in the Air Force, and they had a podcast and a blog site they were doing. And Joe Bogdan, who I think the world of, he had basically reached out to me, asked me to write an article. So I wrote an article on my father's legacy, and it was kind of deep because it was my father passed away when I was 11 years old. And I was going through a box. It was labeled, dad stuff. And I was going through and looking at a bunch of his mementos and trophies and framed photos and newspaper articles and just all this stuff from him. And it just got me doing some like really deep soul searching on my own. I'm like, gosh, is this my legacy when I finish the military? Is it going to be this stuff gets put, all my stuff hanging in my office at work, and these decorations and medals and all this other stuff, they're going to get put in a box and it's going to be dad's stuff at some point in time. And just really made me think. And, but it's ultimately about the lessons he taught me and the conversations we had sitting on the steps after school one day on a random Tuesday that I still remember from 1993. And so I wrote the article, went on there and did their podcast. I was one of their first couple of guests, actually, and did it, kind of got that itch for it. And then I was also thinking, well, I'm teaching at EPMEIC, the Enlisted Professional Military Education Instructor course. I have to do it too because my mom listens to mine and she doesn't know any of those acronyms. But so at the course, part of it is we have to work on facilitating discussions and active critical listening to people and being able to take a topic as simple as like trust and have a 2-hour conversation on it based off the questions we ask. So I was like, what better way for me to fine tune that than to start a podcast of my own? And then what cooler way to do it than to not just interview military personnel, but athletes and actors and authors and CEOs and all these other people. So I've been very fortunate enough to, be able to talk to these individuals. And it's really, we all have shadows. We all have dark moments, those moments that linger with us that if we don't talk about them, if we don't bring them to the surface, they can drag us down. And I let my story drag me down for most of my life until I really embraced it. And was like, this is part of who I am. And I brought that shadow into the light. And we focus on inspiring, motivating people by listening to other people's experiences. I really like to quote, while it's wise to learn from our own experiences, it's wiser to learn from the experience of others. And just hearing a story of just a random guest, you may tune into an episode, not even knowing much about them, but all of a sudden now you have a connection with them and you've been through something similar and they've overcome this. It can give you that sense of hope. And nothing cooler than having a Navy chaplain who's like, hey, I'm motivated by this comedian that I heard on this podcast. So it's really cool. It's really fun. And it's one of those things that every single time I go to record with someone, I always tell my wife, like, don't let me forget this feeling. This is really cool that I get to talk to this person or this person or this person. So I'm still kind of a fan of every single person that's been on the podcast as well. So it's really cool to be able to do it.
I love that. I just started. So I've had the Live Well YouTube channel for a while, for over a year now, but I just started bringing people on to have these conversations. Every single one of them, it's hard for me when I go back and I do the intro and I'm like, I'm so excited about this because I am on every single one.
Yeah, if you feel repetitive, you're like super excited for this episode. Every single one. But you're not lying.
I'm not. And it's the most genuine feeling because each and every person and each and every topic is so unique. And that's the whole point I think that you're saying, you're making, is everyone has a story. Like
100%.
And I know it's just such a generic thing to say, but when you actually start these conversations and this dialogue, you see that one of the things that I wanted to share with you was that I was doing a lot of interviewing and researching offline for a book that I'm writing. And I did not expect what came out of a lot of the things that I discovered. I did not expect one of the outcomes or one of the findings to be the power of the share. I just didn't. I knew that it was a powerful thing because I had been sharing online for a while and people were responding, but I didn't really connect the dots of the healing that occurs when someone shares and then someone is the recipient of that share. So it's for both parties. And then you have the bystander who gets, like you, the podcast host, and me on here, right? We're like the bystander of that share sometimes because maybe that particular story didn't resonate with us because we didn't go through that, but we learned from that experience and then we translate it for ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, the power of the share is incredible. So kind of speaking about that and, wanting to dive a little bit deeper into your story, what is your shadow that you were able to bring to the light? What is your sort of thing the revelation that you've had, or just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, 100%. It's for me, I grew up, my father was a defense attorney. He was in the Navy as an officer, and I was a latchkey kid growing up. Mom and dad, I mean, they were successful, and it was a good life. We were the typical Olin Mills family portrait, hanging up over the fireplace. I mean, it was just life was really, really good for me. And we moved to Charleston, South Carolina, a little suburb, Mount Pleasant, when I was about 10 years old. And at the time I was like, life is still really good. Things are going my way. I'm going to grow up and be a successful doctor or something. Life is perfect. And leading up to it, or leading up to the end of my fifth grade year, I remember my dad was really involved in our lives. Like, he was just super involved. He would come home from work and he would immediately get dressed out of his suit and tie and into some just casual clothes. And he would start playing with me and my sister. And we were, 10, 11. And he would go upstairs, play school with her stuffed animals. And he'd go in my room and play video games, or we would go ride bikes or basketball. And in doing some of these, I would catch him breathing in like a paper bag. And I was like, "Hey, is everything okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, just don't tell your mom." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, got it." He's my best friend. My mom was more the disciplinarian. So I didn't want to rat out my dad. I wasn't a snitch as a 10-year-old. So I'm like, "Yep, understood." And then we were riding bikes one day and he fell off the bike and got up and started breathing in his bag. And I was like, "Are you sure you're okay?" And he's like, "Yeah." And his neck was really red. And he's like, "Well, it's just from shaving." And it was June 23rd, 1993. I went downstairs to do something. I was working on like a school project or something. And I went and asked him a question. And he grabbed me by the arm and he was like, "Hey, if anything ever happens to me, take care of the girls, take care of your mom and your sister." And I'm like, "Okay, can I go back upstairs and play?" And he told me he loved me. He went upstairs, or I went upstairs, and then about an hour later, we just heard this loud thud, and I went downstairs with my sister. Actually, she went downstairs first, and she started screaming. My dad was just laying there on the floor. He had a heart attack. Him and my mom were watching television, and he stood up and just had a heart attack right in front of her. And we all three tried to revive him. EMTs came, took him to the hospital, and then on July 9th, 1993, he passed away at 42. So he's really young. And which kind of, has been that number I've had circled forever as number 42, because I'm 40 right now. So physical fitness to me is huge. But I lived with that guilt of not speaking up whenever I would see him breathing in a bag. And then my sister started a downward spiral right after that. And she was, I mean, if my daughter now Beckton, if she was, half of what Myers was at 10, 11 years old, I would have been perfectly happy as well. She was just a good girl. But then she got into drugs and alcohol and abusive relationships. This was all by the time she's 14. So she had a just tumultuous 10 to 14 age range. And she met this guy that was about 2 years older than her. And, when you're younger, 16, 14, that's a huge age gap. And started talking to this guy that was 16. And we were fixing to move to, my mom had met someone. We were going to move from North Carolina to South Carolina. And she did not come to my grandmother's house. We were supposed to all meet there, spend the night, wake up, make the move the next morning. She didn't show up. And then I remember my mom at like 2 a.m. I remember someone came to the door. They rang the doorbell, and I could hear my mom downstairs talking to the cops. And they basically told her that there was an accident. My sister was involved. And I was, kind of listening, but my mom came upstairs to tell me, she broke the news to me that my sister had passed away, and she was murdered. It was a murder-suicide. And 14 years old. I was 16. So from 1993 to 98, it was losing my father, losing my sister. And I remember that same, I was kind of joking about it, like the growing pains portrait of the family. But I would look at it and I'm like, well, now I've lost two of these key people in the house, and it's just key people in my life. And I didn't understand how to process it. So I started at a new high school the next week. So brand new high school, new state, no friends. And I remember driving to the high school just in tears, but I have to hide it because, I'm a guy, I don't cry. And I remember going in process at the front desk, and they had my sister's school ID, which we already had taken, hanging up. And it was on their screensavers at the time as well. Just kind of a dedication thing. And I lost it. I just absolutely lost it. But my shadow was I didn't really know how to internalize it, how to process it. My drive for school pretty much fizzled out. And that was, end of my 10th grade, beginning of my 11th grade year. So no drive for that, no drive for what I wanted to even do after school. Every aspiration I had was just kind of gone at that point. And now I'm in this new state, new friends, trying to make, sense of what in the world is going on in my life. It was like someone did that. My life was just changed, everything about it. Yeah. And it wasn't until, even when I joined the military, it was still a story I didn't really want to share with people, didn't want to talk to people about. I was still having a tough time to find like my purpose, my drive. But, I started teaching, and I would have students come through, and they've been through some, I preach like a transparent, vulnerable environment in my classroom where we can open up and share stuff. And students would start talking to me about experiences they had been through. And then I was like, wow, people have been through the same thing as me. And there's no comparison, like one's worse than the other or anything like that. It was just they've been through something similar. And being able to hear that and talk to them was really powerful to me. And I think that on top of the writing the article kind of gave me the courage, I guess, to sit down. I believe it was my third episode of my podcast, but I just sat down and I hit the record button, and it was just very raw. It was just, I think it was like 30 minutes, but I basically just told my story on there of what I had been through. So yeah, that was kind of the journey that I had to over. And I'm sorry, my dogs are all barking in the back.
It's fine. We welcome dogs here.
But yeah, that's kind of a part of my journey right there.
Oh, when you noticed, first of all, before I say anything, I'm so sorry that you experienced that in your life. It's devastating and it's hard. Do you feel when you started to notice that little glimpse of connection with other people when they would bring up stories, whether it be similar or not, but just hardships that they were going through, did it spark something? Is that what you're saying kind of sparked you to want to address it more with others because maybe your story could resonate? Like, how did that land?
Yeah, it hearing it from other people definitely sparked something in me. Hearing others go through something similar, people who had gone through whether it was a sibling or some sort of family member who had had something with substance abuse, suicidal tendencies. My sister did at one point have some suicidal tendencies as well. And hearing people talk about that, and then them not really, they're kind of like, hey, I don't want to open up and share this, but y'all are the first people I've told this to. And then whenever I would have them like one-on-one and talk to them, it would be, hey, I've been through something similar. I've been through a similar situation. And it really strengthened that connection. Yeah. And they were like, hey, I'm going to believe in anything you say inside of that classroom, because you're not lying to me. You're a good person. You see a person in me and not just I'm a student coming through your schoolhouse. So yeah, that did, seeing and helping other people did kind of, I guess, help expedite that and make me see that, okay, I can really go through this. And then I had a student of mine that he had passed away from a car accident, and I had to go in and teach. And, I went in, it was the hardest thing because I heard it right before I went into the classroom, and got it text. He was one of my students in Germany, but I was already here at the course, and it was my very first class here. So I'm already overwhelmed. I'm in there with a bunch of senior non-commissioned officers that I'm trying to teach to as a non-commissioned officer. And I remember I went in and I kept my composure. I taught the lesson for 45 minutes. Actually, I think it was like 3 or 4 lessons that I had to teach. So it was probably about a total of around 4 hours.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I fought back a couple of tears, but I said, hey, I just want to let y'all know y'all are about to be teachers. Here's what I went through today. Here's what I found out.
Yeah.
I still put on that mask for each and every one of you, but it's all right to hurt and go through as an instructor because, or any job that you have, because I just had to do that now. And then I went in my office and it was just Niagara Falls, getting it out of my system. But
Bodi, I'm glad to hear that you did that release. I think, and I can only speak for our military bond and service, and I can't speak further. Although I think there's a potential for this prevalence all across the civilian population, is the putting of the mask on, to make sure that we show up for whatever that is. Mm-hmm. But I also think that there's an element of everything. So much of what we do has an air of urgency, importance, mission critical. So what we do even in our training is we are constantly training ourselves to bandage up, put the Band-Aid on, get back in the fight, and you'll figure it out later. Well, yeah, that's relevant when we're talking about at war, in theater, all of those things. But when we use that mindset and we are not at war, we forget to go back, take the Band-Aid off, and address the wound. Yeah. And I think that has really led to a lot of problems for our folks, and that's definitely what I did. It was like, what Band-Aid is going to hold up that one actually, so let me put another one on, and it was just a constant thing over and over. So I kind of wanted to ask you, it's good to hear that you did have that release valve, that day. But do you have any practices in place where you're sort of diving into a little bit of that, addressing the wound and not just keeping busy and putting the Band-Aids over it? Like, what is that for you? Like,
yeah, one of the things I got certified on a while back, and I've been teaching a lot, and it's changed my life more than anything, was emotional intelligence and being on an emotional growth journey. And it's like the bowling balls in the closet. It's like, hey, just cram it in there, address it later. Cram that next issue in there, address it later. Yeah. Eventually that closet door is going to swing open and they're going to tumble on top of you. And I do think the old Vietnam mindset, leadership mindset of get over it, you're in the military, rub some dirt on it.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that a lot of that mentality is starting to kind of fade out a little bit, and we're starting to mental health. I've never heard mental health mentioned as much as I have the past 5 years, especially when the pandemic happened and people were crammed inside of their house with their family, and you can't get out and do anything, and all sorts of social interaction was cut off outside of these cameras. And suicide awareness, anything, PTSD, substance abuse, all this stuff I'm hearing so much more about addressing these things than I was when I joined 14 years ago. And I went to mental health and I got seen, and I am not ashamed to say it, and I never will be. I went, and it was, the stigma is, oh, it'll ruin your career, it'll mess you up. I went in there just to talk because I was quick to point out what was wrong with everybody else's vehicle, but I was afraid to pop my own hood.
Yeah.
See what was going on with me. Yeah. And I had check engine lights and flat tires, and I had some issues, but just to go in there and talk to someone and have them actually pose questions to me different really, really helped. And one of the best tools I heard from Noble Gibbons, and I'll give him 100% credit for it, is he said, there's a tool called the emotional wheel. And if you Google it, it's this rainbow colored looking wheel with all the different emotions. Mm-hmm. The average person's emotional vocabulary is about 6 to 8 words. And, but yet there's thousands of emotions. Mm-hmm. And I always like to do a thing with any class that I teach is I give them a hypothetical. I'm like, all right, Mary, I come up to you and I push you down. aggressively, how do you feel? And I'm like, only you can give me the words. What is it? And it's always mad, angry, confused, frustrated, but they usually, falter out at like 5. It's like,
Yeah.
that's all I got is 5.
Yeah.
And, but if you look at the emotional wheel, you can look at it, and on like the very beginning of it, the inside of the circle, it's like Simon Sinek, start with the why. You start on the inside, work your way out. Every one of those categories that you can identify one of those words, you break it down to the next group of wording. And it really helps you expand your vocabulary, because we can't tame our emotions if we can't name our emotions. And a lot of times we don't even know what we're feeling. We're so frustrated, we're so frazzled, and we keep slapping the same label of the same emotions over and over and over. So with that tool, it is, you basically get in your car, you sit in your office, you get somewhere quiet. But if you've made me mad, I pull this tool up on my phone and I just go through the emotional wheel, and I allow myself time to sit in every one of those emotions. Worst thing we can do to someone is say, well, you shouldn't feel that way. You should never tell someone how they feel. They're entitled to how they feel, but you should allow yourself to feel that as well, and sit in it and say, all right, I am frustrated. I am angry, and let out a scream. And once you get all that out of your system, it's very therapeutic. And I know it seems real simple, but like, I do it, and it's better for me to go in my car and let off steam or my office, than to being like, no, she needs to know. And then you go up there, and now you've got a whole nother bag of issues on your hands. So
it always seems like a good idea to address it in the heightened
and then your amygdala's all out of whack too, so you get your body's just flooding with amygdala or cortisol from your amygdala. And it's just, when you do go to confront someone, and you're fumbling over words, and you're like, well, you know what I mean, like, and
you don't even.
Then when you cool down,
exactly.
You know what you want to say to them.
No, exactly. I love that, the emotional wheel. I too had gone. I actually just got certified to issue assessments for EQI 2.0.
Hey,
yeah, it's incredible. The course was incredible.
Love it.
And the emotional intelligence 2.0. I will
Great
make
book.
sure to put that in the link below this video, because it's a short read, but oh my goodness, like mind blown.
Yeah.
So it really, really good. But yeah, so emotional intelligence being one of your foundationals to kind of center yourself back. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I also want to address what you had said about the expansion of discussion surrounding mental health. And I love that too. I think that is, I've always been an advocate. I've always been an advocate for people to get the help they needed, to try to break the stigma. But I have to tell you, the day I had to make that phone call, and I won't rehash the whole story. I know probably people listening have heard this story, but the day I had to make that phone call, and the irony is not lost on me that I was the senior enlisted advisor in the Integrated Resilience Office at the Pentagon over all of the Air Force.
See?
Right? And I still had the hardest time making that call. And when I made the call, they had shuffled me around to like 2 or 3 different places. That's a whole nother conversation. And then I called one of my guys I work with, and he was like, I said, well, it didn't work. It's just too much. And he goes, well, I guess we'll be trying tomorrow then again. And I was like, yeah, all right. Right. So it's good to have a support system. But anyway, the point to that being that it's not an easy thing. And even us advocates out here, can say, it's okay to do it, but we understand that first step is difficult. But I liken that step for me, the mental health call, getting into therapy, taking medication prescribed to me. That was like me being in the middle of the ocean by myself and someone throwing me a life preserver.
Mm-hmm.
So now I could get my head above the water. I could rest for a second. I could figure out what my plan was, but I can't live there. I had to swim ashore. And so all the inner work and the practices I've implemented, things like that got me to the shore, laying on the beach, basking in the sun. But it was a process. But I really feel like for me, that first tool was crucial. So like you said, getting in there and talking about it. What do you think is like the most important tool or technique that you do to help yourself on this healing journey?
Yeah, for me, it was just getting started, kind of what you said. And I was actually kind of mad at myself that I didn't go sooner, because everywhere I've been, I don't know if it's just me, but everywhere I've been, I've always had an issue with somebody that I work with. Um, and, but it's just, I've let little things stress me out. I would find myself getting anxious over things for tomorrow that I have no idea what tomorrow, and then they always work out fine. And I was really bad at, I was that screen at the movie theater. I was allowing others to project their motion picture, their drama onto me. And I was able to feel that. And someone would be stressed. Well, now I'm stressed. If somebody was in a bad mood, not feeling good. Now I'm not feeling good. Now we're having words. And I remember I was, mental health's always like in the back of the clinic, in some back corner. It's never like the first thing you see when you walk in, and then the stigma behind it. And I remember my commandant at the time, we were teaching virtual, and he logged in and he was telling our guest speaker, hey, I really like your post on LinkedIn the other day. Now, keep in mind, all the students are in the virtual auditorium. They can hear all of this, but their cameras are turned off. And it's during one of our breaks. And he's like, yeah, your post on LinkedIn encouraged me to go to mental health. And I'm freaking out on this side. I'm like, my commandant, who's a defender, which is like you definitely don't go to mental health, or at least the stigma is. Chief Master Sergeant, highest rank of enlisted, a cop, and he's telling all of the students as a commandant that he goes to mental health and he has a mental health appointment next week. So I text him and I was like, sir, you're hot mic'd. You're in the auditorium. They know, everyone can hear you. And he didn't even text me back, like in the chat. He's like, I know. And so afterwards I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, a lot more respectful than that. But he was basically like, look, if I am a chief, if I am a cop, and if I'm the commandant and I can tell people that I can go to mental health, they can't tell me they can't.
Right.
And he's like, he said every time he would go into mental health, they would thank him for coming in uniform, because everyone got to see a chief walking in there. And when he did that, I was like, you know what? I need to go. And I went and I filled out the questionnaires and went in and talked to someone in the back. And I was worried because I'm like, I've got a developmental special duty job. I got selected for this. They could send me back to my career field. But I didn't care. I knew I needed to get my head straight and just eliminate some of the self-doubts and stuff that I had. So I went in there and started talking to them. They pitched some amazing questions at me. It was just a conversation. Yeah. Is really what it was. It wasn't like Stranger Things, where they hook you up to all this stuff and they're running tests. It was just, I went in and sat down and talked to somebody. And I actually didn't want my sessions to quit. They were, when my time finished with my my mental health technician, I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, she actually PCS'd, and I was like, no, I don't want it to quit. But she said, I think I've equipped you with all the tools. And the biggest thing was just slowing down and just really understanding how to reprogram the way that I go about things in terms of, and that's what sparked my emotional intelligence journey. So it kind of helped me understand that, like, I can control the way I feel. I can be in control of that. And then if I'm in control of how I feel, I can be better around my wife and my daughter. And it gets tested sometimes. We went to, I just told a class this other day, we went to Universal Studios. We were doing the Horror Nights thing. Mm-hmm. Had tickets in the backpack. We drove all the way there, go to the hotel, check in. We get in the car. We're in like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Orlando traffic. And we're in your GPS, when it turns like red, for like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I saw that coming up and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to be late. And then my wife says, you have the tickets, right? They're sitting on the bed at the hotel. And I knew I had to turn around. But to me, that was like a huge moment for me, because 5 years before, I would have lost it. I would have been so immature with my emotions, and I would have blamed my wife. I would have been like, well, you could have checked to see if the bag was in the car as well. Right. And then probably blame my daughter. And because she's old enough now, so I probably would have blamed both of them.
Yeah.
But now I had my moment to just sit in it. I had to allow myself. I had to tell my wife, like, just let me feel this anger and frustration and disappointment, self-disappointment for a minute. And I just turned the radio off, sat in it, said, I reassured her, this is not you. And then I turned the radio back up and I said, it's going to be fine. We're going to get the tickets. We're going to get there. We're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I probably would have road raged, and I would have been the one that like exited off at like 90 miles per hour just because I'm so mad.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and Bodi, fully justified. Like, I think that's the part, not, and I don't mean that in reality. I mean, to you, that person who was processing those emotions back then, 5 years ago, as you said, that was in that moment when we're going through that, we're fully justified to be this angry. Like this is how we have normalized our kind of, what is it called when you what is it called?
Like to express.
Yes, but yes, and lash out. There it is.
Yeah.
When you lash out, it makes so much sense. How else would I feel about this? Right. So the process and the growth that you can witness and watch in yourself, it's incredible. And it's like, I want to go back to something you had mentioned, which was I'm in control of my own feelings. And that's definitely something I really want everyone to hear, is that is not just, it's not psychobabble. It's not, suppression. It's not any of those things that are actually, harmful to us. No, when you actually understand that you are in control of your own emotions, the world changes.
100%.
Right? Because you change the way you see
relationships, friendships,
everything,
work relationships.
Yeah. You know what? I even start, I make a conscious effort to stop saying to the kids, to our kids, is you made me feel. I no longer say that, because they don't have that power. I chose. And so when I get upset, because I'm human and I do, and I get angry or I snap or something, like, I'm snappy, I'll say, I chose that emotion in the moment because I thought it was the justified emotion, and it wasn't. Right. And so I'm changing the narrative for our kids, because I don't want them to think that they have control, or that they could make someone happy, that they could make someone mad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's just been an important lesson to me. So I appreciate that you said that. Yeah,
actually, I taught it for the, I went and taught emotional intelligence for the high school students here.
Oh, wow.
And they gave me like the Dangerous Minds group. And it was rough. But what I did was, when I went in there, I knew that when I mentioned emotions, they weren't going to be, hey, we're glad you're here. They had no idea what they were coming into when they were talking to me. It was kind of a go in here, listen. But I gave them I said, I got y'all something for free. I'm going to give y'all a gift. Are y'all excited? And they were, yeah, what is it? And I gave them this. And it was just a pen. And I was like, here's your pen. Each of y'all get one. And now they're disappointed. And then I said, I got one more thing. And I gave my empty note card. And I said, now on the side of the note card with no lines, just write your name on it. And they wrote their name. And I said, now flip it back over. And I said, I want each of y'all to tell me what it says on the side of the card with all the lines. And they were like, nothing. And I said, right. And I gave you a pen as well. You control your narrative. When you walk out of this room, you, as long as you are in control of your pen, can do whatever you want and write your own narrative from here on out. However, the first time you bump into someone and you turn around and you make a comment to them, you've given them that pen. They're going to write your narrative for you. The first time you allowed someone to project their anxiety, their stress, their frustration, their pissed offness onto you, you might as well give them that pen that I just gave you, because they're going to take your card and write your narrative for you and label you as this or that and the other. You hang on to that pen and you control your narrative from here on out. Because right now, other people have been writing it for you. I can guarantee you. And at the time, I was like, man, this is going to be the best speech ever. They're going to love this. And I went in there and did it. And the looks on my face were not the reactions I wanted. I thought they were going to get up and run out the class and just go become valedictorian. But when it ended, there was still a lot of pushback on a lot of the concepts that I was going over. And when it ended, this one kid was just driving me absolutely crazy. he came up, he waited till everybody else left, and he's like, can I get an extra pen and notepad, because I want to take that back to my house as well, give that to one of my siblings. And then he told me he was diagnosed as schizophrenic. And then the next kid came up during the second brief and was like, I come from an abusive household. And just hearing them come up and tell their stories and seeing that things could resonate with them, it was really cool to see that even kids can express how they feel, if afforded that opportunity. So it's, even with my daughter, I'll just sit her down and be like, you tell me how that made you feel. As parents, we think we know how they feel, but it's express it to me. And I'm working on her emotional vocabulary as well. So it's kind of cool. My whole household's kind of bought into it. And you know what? It makes for an easier house. It really does. And easier to work with people. And that's why I said, I wish I would have known this a lot sooner, because there's been so many assignments and so many people that I've worked with in the Air Force and that I've worked with in civilian life that I just had so many clashes with, where if I would have been emotionally intelligent, I wouldn't have let them control my emotions like I allowed them to do.
Oh, same. I think about the hours I wasted just analyzing someone when all I had to do was...
It's frustrating. Worry about you.
Yes, worry about me. But not to be the eternal optimist that I am, I'm glad that we found this out now instead of when we're 60.
Some people never figure it out.
Right? So, I mean,
yeah.
There's that. And, you know, it's funny because I was actually a guest on a podcast just yesterday, actually. But one of the things I was asked was, you know, if you could do anything different. And I've really tried to eradicate the word regret out of my vocabulary. I love my journey so much that I can't possibly wish any of it away.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a huge part of my healing process, because I don't look back and regret anything. And I don't say I would have done XYZ different, because that would change my journey. And I just am in love with my journey. True. So I think that's something really, you know, now moving forward. But, you know, now we know this stuff, and now we're going to have it's kind of like we've opened up the floodgates of the learning, because just give it all to me. I want everything, you know?
Oh, and yeah, once you start, like, our emotional intelligence is one of those things that, to someone who's never really experienced it, they're kind of like, this sounds like a retreat for the weekend and you're going to come back fixed or what. But it is like, you read EQ 2.0. Then you're like, what's the next one? Yeah. I can't tell you how many, there's not a lot of EQ books out there. There's not a lot. You go to Books A Million or somewhere, good luck. That'll be the only one you'll really find. But you want more and more and more of it, because you read these things and you hear these things, and it's like, where was this?
Yeah.
But now it's motivating, because you're like, but I am on this better journey of bettering myself and being more. I like the fact that I can walk out the door in the morning to go to work and I'm not stressed. I'm going into a career field that I've been out of for 6 years, and people are like, oh my gosh, they're telling me, you know, like the adjustment's going to be tough. And I'm like, you know what? I'm a different person than I was when I left. Yeah. And I'm actually excited to see how this version of me, that it's really, really hard to stress out, handles it. Even watching sports games, I don't let those I've kind of come to terms that I don't play for North Carolina.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to let it stress me out anymore. But yeah. It's nice. It's nice to, like you said, look back and see like some of the things hellfire and brimstone, and then to be standing here like motivated and inspired. That's strength in people to be able to do that. And that's, you know, hopefully my daughter, if somebody asked her about me 50 years from now, she can say, he had a bunch of bad cards dealt to him, but he stayed optimistic and positive and upbeat. And you never would have known his story if he had not told anybody. And I think that's kind of where, what I want her to say about me when all is said and done.
Yeah, man, listen, I feel like you're stepping into, and I don't want to speak for your journey, but it feels like you're stepping into being pulled in directions that I just want you to pay attention to. Pay attention to what is really inspiring you and where you're feeling you're being called, because, just that encounter, you will never know the effects of that time you spent with those high school kids, but the ripple effect of that, those are the things that we do not acknowledge enough about our efforts to serve in a heartfelt capacity. Like we don't realize that. Like I'll post something online, and sure, I do get a lot of DMs that come back and say, this is me, I feel heard, I feel like I'm not alone. But how many people don't email me or message me, that are reading those things? And so just, you're kind of, you're aware now, and let that lead you in a lot of ways. That's really exciting. And I do have to say that anyone who gets a chance to work with you, I have a couple things to say to you, but anyone who gets a chance to work with you is so blessed and so lucky to watch that in action, because I often wonder, how would I have fared had I been able to stay as the person I am today? I didn't. Actually, my discovery in all of this led me to retirement. It's like it was no longer in alignment with me, but we didn't have enough people that are like you and where you're at on this journey. And so please do those things. Share you just leading by example is going to be a huge thing, but you know what? Just watch how it resonates with people. I think it's amazing. We just don't have it enough, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So listen, Bodi, I can't thank you enough for joining us here, for talking us through a very difficult story and for sharing that. I know one thing I want people to walk away with is to understand that no matter what it is, a lot of times, well, probably all the time, we all have different causes of our pain. We have different reasons for how that might happen. I won't even list them, you understand, but often the symptoms are very similar, and so just understanding that we don't have to play the comparison game, but having the empathy and the emotional intelligence to show up for somebody and just show compassion. And so I really appreciate you sharing such a hard story with us. Any last things you kind of want to share with the listeners and the viewers on wellness and your journey?
Yeah, I just encourage anyone out there, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling constantly worrying about stuff, I definitely encourage you to throw in the Google machine, emotional intelligence, and start looking it up. And the brain is something that has really started to intrigue me so much recently, just because you can ask someone about it, like what it does, and they're like, oh, it thinks, it keeps our heart beating. It's people don't have a whole lot of answers, but it really does. It controls your working memories, your emotions. Everything's in there. And start doing some research on how we tick the way we tick. And everybody's unique. Nobody is a broken toy or anything like that. It's just everybody brings something to the table. Everybody's special. And, everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a story to tell. And guarantee you someone out there has something that's happened to them that if you were to bring that to the light, it could probably motivate and inspire others. And the other piece was what you were saying about, we may not know the impact of what we say or do and how it has on others. And someone told me, they were like, as an instructor, as a podcast host, you may plant a seed in someone's head, and the beauty of it is you may never see the tree fully grown, but it will grow, and you may never be the one to sit under the shade, but just you planting that seed's enough work by itself just to get someone's wheels in motion. So yeah, I know it's kind of all over the place.
No, that I gotta stop because I want to say something. No, that was great.
Yeah.
The way that I love that, the seed, not seeing the full grown tree, but just knowing. I love that. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here and talking with us.
Absolutely. I appreciate you. This was awesome.
Thank you so much, Bodi, for hanging out with us and for sharing your story. One thing that has been ringing clear and true to me is the power that resides in the share. When we share with others the things that happen in our lives, the healing that occurs from both the sharer and the recipient of that message in the way of connection and bringing people together to make sure they don't feel so alone is just so powerful. So thank you for being a part of that. Don't forget to check out the Shadows podcast. It's incredible. It's so fun. In fact, he just had me on as a guest and I think I giggled the whole way through it. So it's really fun. Check it out. I'll link all that stuff below the description of this video. Thank you so much for joining us here, and remember, be well and live well. Bye-bye. Anyone else's lips super dry? I've had chapped lips for 3 weeks. Suggestions? Help me out.